listening to this broadcast, you're a part of the resistance.
You know, somewhere there's an alternate reality where George Lucas never sold Lucasfilm and made one final trilogy about midi-chlorians and what he believes the nature of the Force really is. Now imagine fans on social media in that world. I think I'll take what we have now. Welcome back. You have found the Resistance broadcast. My name is John Hoey. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to hang out with us for a bit as we talk about Star Wars. We're going to get into what it would be like if that indeed happened, though, and George made those movies in a little bit. We have a lot to get into tonight, including your Resistance transmissions, so let's bring in my two favorite galactic gabbers, James Bainey and Lacey Gilleran. What's up, guys?
I think tonight is going to be one of the weirdest conversations. I mean, we've talked about what Rian Johnson's trilogy could be, but I think this conversation of what this weird midi-chlorian world would be like is going to be a very interesting conversation. What do you think, Lacey?
It's poetry. It rhymes. I think
what rhymes with midi-chlorian, though?
I don't know. Hey guys, what's up? Excited to be here. Not really excited to be on this alternate timeline. Although, yeah, no. Nope. All right, cool. Let's go.
Yeah, it's definitely all about hypotheticals, and we are taking the space-time continuum to a different reality, and we're going to get into it, and I'm curious to see where we go with it, but it'll be nice to take a departure from where we are now, right, and do this hypothetical thing. But before we get into the deep discussion about if George never sold Lucasfilm, let's find out if the Force is with us on some stuff. Lacey, what's going on?
The Force will be with you, always.
George Lucas revealed details about what his final 3 Star Wars movies would have been about, revolving around the nature of the Force, saying, quote, "The 3 next Star Wars films were going to get into a microbiotic world, but there's this world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Wills, and the Wills are the ones who actually control the universe. They feed off the Force," end quote. So, with George saying this, Lucasfilm should buy Lucas's ideas and tell them, or some form of them, in a series of films as they expand the franchise. Is the Force with you, John?
I'm going to say no, the Force is not with me. As much as it saddens me that he seems to have at least some sense of regret, the time is just past. Every creator has their time, and I think George's has passed. He had the greatest run of all time, but even Michael Jordan hung up his Nikes after a while too. So, also, if it's not him actually producing it or writing it, then there'll be a lot of backlash that they took not only his franchise, but now his literal stories and quote-unquote ruin it or something like that. So, if I was Lucasfilm, I would stay far away from this. As sad as that is to think about, because George seems like that's the stories he would have told had he not sold it. But we'll get into more of that later.
James?
I'm going to go ahead and give my answer as of now, but I feel like I'm going to be swayed one way or another later when we get into our conversation of what this maybe would have been like. As of now, though, I'm going to say, yeah, sure. I think that that's why these other forms of series of films or, these other little things could be about is to dive deeper into some of these other elements of the Force and kind of explaining some of that stuff. That's the things that I find fascinating about, I know it kind of sounds weird to say, but that's one of the things that I did like about Phantom Menace. So I say if they want to take some of these ideas and tell them in comics or other little things just to kind of praise Lucas and kind of continue
books?
his story in some of the novels, if you will, then I think go for it. Force is with me.
That's what I thought. James is all about the books and literary worlds for Star Wars. The Force is not with me on this one, and this is why. Look, I love George. I love his plaid shirts and his white Nikes. But he's kind of like him and other really, really smart creative people. And I'm going to use this example, J.K. Rowling. Harry Potter kind of had its time. And it's wonderful and it's perfect. And everything she did with it was amazing. Years later, I don't want to hear who should have ended up with who or who shouldn't have died or things like that. Like, she's too much in her head that she's starting to second guess decisions she made with the book that were so perfect. I would just get nervous that George would like start to like second guess things or be like, oh, I wish I could have done it this way. Like, I think, like John said, his time has passed. And I think they should just move forward with new stories and new storytellers with the groundwork that he's so perfectly laid.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, so my boy John Boyega is the latest Star Wars talent to take to Twitter to fight back against online bullies and haters. The haters. Many fans latched onto the actor's tweets and showered him with support. I was one of them. Perhaps the social media world we live in almost requires talent to publicly address toxicity, a department from how things used to be with actors. Star Wars talent should engage more with fans on social media to clarify situations and defend against wrongful accusations. There is no reason they shouldn't have their voice be heard. Is the Force with you, James?
Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit when we were talking about should George Lucas, stand up for some of this stuff and talk about his feelings on the selling of Lucasfilm, the toxicity in the fandom last week. And my opinion still kind of stands on this, that I don't know that any of that stuff helps. I think it is kind of a way to take a position to say, like, it almost seems like a PR move. Not that the people who are saying these things don't believe those things. I do believe that when John Boyega says what he says to these fans, that he does truthfully mean those things. But the only way that I feel like they should do it is from a PR standpoint. In all honesty, I feel like it doesn't really make that big of a difference. So, Daisy Ridley not saying anything is totally fine with me. John Boyega saying something is totally fine with me. So should they do it? No, Force is not with me.
John?
I'm also going to say the Force is not with me. A little skewed from what James said, because last week I did say George Lucas should probably speak on the toxicity in fandom, and I only think he should because he created the whole thing. When it comes to actors and stuff like that, this sounds strange, but it actually seems, and hear me out before you guys jump at me, but it seems like fan bullying to me, and I'll try to explain that. So it's like they're bullying bullies. So I get that he was going back at some rude people, but you have a guy who may have like 5 followers, who may have some problems of his own, getting hit back by an actor who has millions of followers. So to me, it's almost like it's a gang up mentality, and it actually rubs me the wrong way. Like, if he quote tweets someone and then that guy just gets absolutely like destroyed by like 500,000 people, like,
I can't imagine what that's like, John.
Yeah, I know you know what that's like, Millie Bobby Brown.
No,
that's
Mark
right. It happened
Hamill.
to you.
Oh, and Mark Hamill too. Yeah,
Yeah.
James. Everybody goes after James Baney.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying Boyega was wrong at all. That's not what I'm saying. But it just doesn't seem like it does much good, like James said. It's best to stay away, in my opinion, and just keep kicking ass on screen and doing your thing. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't do it. I just personally don't think it does any good. And like I said, sometimes the people who are like, yeah, I'm with John Boyega, I want John Boyega to know that I'm with him, and just go after some guy, that guy could be having a rough day, or a girl, So from that perspective, no, the Force is not with me.
I think the Force is with me in that they should engage with fans on social if they feel like it. John wanted to. He felt like he needed something to be heard. Go for it, John. He's like the nicest guy ever, and I'm speaking from meeting him. So I know it wasn't meant.
Wow.
I'm just saying, I know it wasn't meant in a bad way, but I know that he also doesn't want to put up with people's BS. And I think that's an overarching theme here, that a lot of these people are they've had enough. So should they engage with people? Sure. Should they do it healthily? Absolutely. But at the same time, they should have the right to defend themselves, just like John Kasdan had the right to defend himself on social against people. Same with Pablo or anybody else. So yeah, the Force is with me. If they want to, they totally should. And that's where I stand on that.
James, I think you and I should start a name drop tally counter on the podcast for Lacey. And we'll see what it gets up to. We could take bets on how many there'll be like every week. Like side
I've
bets.
only met like 2 people. I just keep bringing up the same 2 people. So it's just, if you're counting people, then it's only going to be 2.
All right.
Okay, and our last topic, our listener Rusty at RustyJ54 asked if Lucasfilm should only continue making live-action Star Wars movies, or if it should go back to exploring making animated films again. So let's create the hypothetical. Is the Force with you on upcoming Star Wars films being animated features? John?
Nope. The Clone Wars stunk, and they have a perfect platform to put out big-budget animated features. The streaming service. I think that's where animated's going to belong. It's going to reside there. Filoni's going to run it. Multiple projects. Yeah, I don't think you'll ever see, and there's no reason for really, an animated Star Wars movie going back to the big screen as a major feature. I know James is going to disagree because he's an animated fiend, but that's my truth, and that's all I can give you right now. So the Force is not with me.
James, are you okay with that answer? Are you doing okay? Do you need a hug? Like, how are you doing?
John, you're still in that weird high school mentality where when people say they watch like anime or something, you're like, oh, cartoons. Like,
I love that you used anime instead of like anything else.
I love how he said I have a high school mentality. I'm 35 years old.
I know, and I'm saying you're still in that high school mentality. No,
you know who loves
thing is,
anime?
like,
John Boyega.
James Baney, give me your lunch money.
I'm trying to answer, is the Force with me or not? All right, look, the thing is that are we going to see it in animation on the big screen? And I could see it down the line, but I think this fits into that world where they're planning on doing 2 or 3 Star Wars movies a year, like that Marvel model that we're talking about. And John convinced me the other week that it probably isn't going to happen, and that's probably not the best for Star Wars. So will it happen? I don't think it will, but should it happen? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because I think animated stories can still be great stories. Like we have the Lego Batman movie, and that was a great movie despite the fact that it wasn't Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight. We have Spider-Man happening right now with Spider-Man Homecoming and also Into the Spider-Verse. And I think people are really excited about that movie because it tells different stories, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a G-rated animated story for Star Wars. It doesn't have to be Rebels or the Clone Wars coming to the movie. They can do something really cool and with a great story, just use the art form of animation to tell it, whether it be 2D drawing or anime style or 3D animation, whatever it is. Animated is just a medium to tell a story, and I would like to see animated get a push onto the big screen in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, I think it should happen.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to agree with James on this one. I think the Force is with me. I'm all for the animated stuff.
I'm going to shove you both in lockers.
Okay, here's the reasoning why, John. I think, and I don't think I'm part of the minority, actually. The most extreme reactions I've had to movies emotionally have been animated movies. No movie has made me sob like Coco made me sob. Like, I was ugly crying to that movie. Same with Toy Story 3. So I can't imagine that Star Wars animated films moving forward, wouldn't have that emotional appeal that other Disney movies have had. So I'm on board with it. As long as they do a good job and it looks good and the story's there, I'm all for it. John, do you want to change your answer?
Imagine this for a second. Disney and Pixar get together, and they decided that Pixar's next movie is going to be a star. I know it won't happen. I'm just saying, if they did it, imagine that team telling a story in the Star Wars universe that is up to the par of the level that the Pixar movies have done in the past. It would be good. It would be great, and it would be fun to watch. I'm telling you right now, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not saying that it will, but I'm saying that if it did, I would be all on board for that.
I'm picturing that gif of Obi-Wan Kenobi sliding the door and it just saying nope.
All right. Let's move on to the main discussion then, I think.
Yeah, so whether we agree on animation or not, we're going to get into that discussion now about George Lucas, so I'm going to give it back to John. Go ahead, John.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right, so yeah, we are going to have a discussion. You got our takes on if Disney should use George Lucas's ideas in our last segment. But now let's talk about what it would be like if George Lucas never sold Lucasfilm to Disney. So George Lucas sat down with James Cameron and talked about what his ideas were had he kept Lucasfilm, which would have been 3 final movies explaining the nature of the Force via midichlorians and their connection to the Wills. So let's talk about this. What would the climate of Star Wars have been like right now had George Lucas never sold Lucasfilm, made these 3 sequels in his vision about the Force and the midichlorians and all that, which he has gone on record to say he offered treatments to Disney and Lucasfilm, but they declined using them. So let's talk about what fandom would be like if that was a reality, what the movies would be like possibly, and just the overall picture and climate of Star Wars had he kept his company and kept making his films the way he wanted to. So however, whichever area of this you guys want to start it off in, let's fire it up and see where we go with this in this alternate reality.
I wouldn't want to live on this timeline because if Kylo Ren does not exist on this timeline, I am not on it.
And there it is, folks.
And I'm not just Kylo Ren, like Rey and Finn and Poe, and I just love where this story has gone.
You've got to realize that there are other versions of Star Wars where Kylo Ren is not that important or doesn't exist.
I'm obviously joking, but I'm saying I like where it's gone so far, and I wouldn't want that erased because I like where it is right now.
Yep.
I think when it comes to this stuff, it's really hard to say because, of course, we're going to like where it went because we're familiar with that, and it's hard to picture any other story. Like if they were to say, in an original version, Han Solo's character was a female, and you're like, well, that's weird. I like the Han Solo we got, but I'm sure that if we watched those movies, we would have liked it regardless, to whatever what it was. That's why I think when it comes... I think when it comes to these stories, though, there's a billion great stories that Episode 7 could have been. However, I really think that the fandom of not liking Episode 7 and 8 and 9 and where George took these stories would still exist. Especially with the stuff where he expands further on the things that they didn't like about the prequels.
If I understand what you're saying, I do agree on that. Where I'm coming from on that then is where fandom would be had he made those, and I think it would still be a pretty toxic environment just from a different perspective. Correct. I don't think the prequels would have been as forgiven as they are now, because I truly feel a big part of why the prequels are being forgiven and looked on in a lighter tone now is because they were like, oh, well, George made those, and these are people who don't like the sequel movies, and they're like, well, those were George's movies, and you know what? Those weren't so bad. There were better times back then. Things suck now. Now, if he kept it and made these movies and they didn't love them just like they didn't love the prequels, they're not forgiving those prequels. So then you have them still hating on the prequels, hating on the new movies, and it would have been just as much of a disaster. So that's my take on how fandom would be right now. But I do think that they would be hits. I think they would be successful just because he knew how to make his Star Wars movies successful. What are your guys' takes on that? How do you think people would view the prequels had he kept it made his stories?
I don't know. I feel like the fans were like, prime example. Everybody hated Hayden Christensen up until recently, and then when they invited him to Celebration, I feel like a ton of people were like, "Oh my God, it's Hayden!" And this was the guy that like everyone was like, "Oh, he sucks." I don't think he would be treated the same way if George kept going. And not because George didn't tell a good story. I just think people have this negative view of it, and it just would have translated into this new sequel. Whereas I feel like people went into this new sequel with a fresh pair of eyes, so to speak, because George wasn't associated with it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think you guys are convincing me on that, but my gut reaction would be that I think that the people who like the prequels now, would like myself, came around over the past like decade or so. I don't think it had anything really to do with Disney being bought. I think that the people who bashed on the prequels before still bash on the prequels and say that they're not good films.
Yeah, I think it's segmented. I think you're right. But I also do think there are people who didn't like the prequels, and then they've moved on to not liking the sequels, and they're like, well, we thought we had it bad then, but we didn't. We're sorry, George. Like, they're apologetic in a sense. I do think there is a certain population of that. Not all of them, but I hear what you're saying also about the people who didn't still don't. But in terms of what his movies would be like, a George Lucas making new Star Wars movies now with today's technology and stuff like that, like, do you think, like, would they be weirder than some of the prequel stuff? Like, I'm not sure that they would be very good, I'll be honest. CGI has come a long way since 2005, but would he have learned his lesson and done less green screen, or would he have said, oh, wow, now I have even more stuff I can do, and just went even weirder? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I'm personally someone that loves the practical stuff, like the bread that grows in The Force Awakens in front of Rey. Like, that is so cool. And these like
that
really
cool.
practical sets and all like the cool puppets. And even though people hated it, that milk monster, the siren with the boobs, like that thing is so cool, and nobody can argue that it isn't cool, because that is two guys inside of a suit that they had to airdrop on an island. Like, there's no taking away from that type of practical stuff. I do think that George would definitely go into that heavy green screen stuff. I mean, look at the behind-the-scenes things of Hayden Christensen riding that mechanical bull-looking thing, and like they're like staring at big walls of blue with no, nothing to look at. It makes no sense. Whereas you have Rian Johnson using Andy Serkis in a motion capture outfit so that the actors can engage with the actual creature. I hate the things that George added to the special edition stuff, so I have a feeling I would hate anything that he'd go over the top with for CG and whatnot.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that he would have stayed with the technical and the green screen, and he just would have used today's technology. He would have went and talked to his buddy James Cameron, which is how this whole thing kind of got started, and he would have said, hey buddy, what are you working on over here? And then they would have both been heavily involved in new special effects and new techniques that they're doing with digital stuff, and he probably would have missed a huge resurgence of people being like, that I think there's something to be said here, that the fans of episode 7 were really excited because of the practical aspect of it. And I think that George would not have embraced that. Yet I still think people would have liked, or would have enjoyed his episode 7 and his episode 8 for whatever it ended up being. And then 10 years later, maybe they would hate it, but then 10 years later, they'd be like, yeah, it's just another Star Wars movie, just kind of like the prequels are.
Question, do you guys think that George would have killed Luke?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. By the end of 9.
Well, okay. We might even need to define that. Like, did Rian Johnson kill Luke, or did like Luke choose to move on in the Force? Yeah, I know. It's kind of hard to say. Like, I don't think that George
like in
Lucas
the sense
would have
of
had a character stab Luke and Luke dies. Like, I don't think that would have
I'm talking
happened.
about the fact that the director and or writer
no, I
wrote
know. I'm just
that
kidding
Luke
around.
is dead. So
Yes,
my thought was,
Luke would
do
not
you
have
think
survived
George would
in
have killed
episode
him?
9, like staring
Right.
at the suns. Like, I don't think that would have happened. Absolutely not.
And I know I have to say this because I know some of our listeners are like itching and like yelling at us like, but The Force Awakens had more digital effect shots than the prequels. It's we know that, but they also used more practical sets too, and they used them. JJ used them appropriately, where George was almost like CGI, finger painting with CGI everywhere, CGI.
And
so I think there was
JJ
a difference
used
there.
the CG stuff as like he'd build the set and then the outside would be the blue screens. Like, it wouldn't
Right.
be
So
all blue. Like, if you look, guys, go back on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can find them. Look at the sets that they were acting on for any of the episodes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
C-3PO literally walking through a green screen and falling down.
So like, yeah, if you build a practical scene and then you're like, all right, so we're going to make this guy's shoes digital. We're going to make his face digital. We're going to make the thing in his hand digital. We're going to make that thing in the background digital. That's 4 digital shots. Whereas
Right.
this scene in
Yep.
George Lucas's version would have only had 1 digital shot because it's an actor and 1 digital everything behind him, you know?
Everything
The
behind it.
mechanical bull in this meadow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of how that number gets added up, but I'm kind of speaking from ignorance on that. I'm kind of assuming that's where they get their Force Awakens had more digital effects because I think there were more little things to change digitally than just George Lucas's big background.
So Lacey, I guess I wanted to say to your question, like you're saying, is he going to kill Luke? I want to hear your take on that, but also I want us to discuss, would Lucas have obviously involved Luke, Han, and Leia? And we know he teased JJ saying, these movies should be about Darth Vader's grandchildren. So what's your take on that? Adding into the fact that he wanted to make these movies about the origin of the Force and midichlorians. How do we blend all of that?
That's tricky because I'm not the level of storyteller that George Lucas is, or J.J. Abrams is, or Rian Johnson
No one is, yeah.
Right, like they're on another spectrum. But I would be interested to see if he never sold to Disney, if the expanded universe would still exist, and if these sequels would include those characters that everybody likes, like Mara Jade, and if Luke died, would he die, fighting the good fight? Or, would he die of old age and happiness? Like, you don't know. And I think it's really hard for me to say, yes, he would bring this in. But I have a feeling that it wouldn't be these new characters because I don't think he came up with these new characters. I know he didn't.
No.
Here's a quick question. You're saying George Lucas would bring in these characters like Mara Jade and Thrawn and stuff, but those characters aren't necessarily characters that George Lucas created. Those are other people who created those things. How much of the expanded universe was just squashed when George Lucas came out with the prequels? Like, he's like, oh yeah, Mace Windu and the Jedi Council and Qui-Gon Jinn and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And all that stuff was just ruined, and people are like, "Oh man, okay, so all right, this is the new canon. This is the new version."
James, you're a canon nut, right? So do you know? Because I know, and it's been on record that George Lucas he was cool with the expanded universe, but he didn't really acknowledge it. Yeah. He wasn't like, that's a part of my lore and part of my story. He's like, I love, people can tell the stories, and I love that. But it wasn't his personal canon. So he, like you're saying, he wrote the prequels with no regard to any of that stuff. So
yes.
Do you know if, like, when they wiped canon clean, was it that big of a deal then? Because to George Lucas, none of that stuff was canon to him anyway.
I think it was because at the time, people didn't really know that they were going to get any more Star Wars movies. So that canon was just as real as anything else. I think that if the news came out that George Lucas was actually going to do 7, 8, and 9, and that his stories were going to not involve Thrawn and not involve Mara Jade and some of these other stories, the Skywalker twins and stuff, I honestly think people would have reacted better to it because they would have been like, oh, well, we just made all that stuff up. You know what I mean? But Disney coming in and said, now we're going to start to add it, and all of your stuff doesn't. This isn't what they said, but this is how they felt. The fans felt. All of that stuff doesn't matter anymore. I think that's where they really took a little bit of an insult, because if the creator is saying, well, I'm going to do my own thing, they're like, well, sure, that makes sense. It's your story. But if somebody else who's kind of on par with them, Disney, Lucasfilm, they're fans. Like J.J. Abrams is a fan, and he's coming in and he's wiping the clean. Why does he get the right to wipe all that Thrawn stuff away? George Lucas has the right to do that, I think, is kind of how they would see it. That's why I'm not so sure that people would have such a hard time with this George Lucas trilogy. I think if he came in and he was doing this thing, I think there would be things that people don't like. I think people would really have backlashed on this whole concept that he would have went deeper into the midichlorian stuff. I look, hear his point of view on this. I listened to him talk about it, and he's like, well, I had these ideas, about the wills and this whole, James Cameron points out to him, he says, you were creating a religion, George. And my thing with that is, I think that the Force and the way the Force works and all that stuff is very, very interesting and very integral to Star Wars. And people like to say, I liked it when the Force was just this mystical thing, but to me, that's like saying, yeah, I believe in God, but I don't want to know anything more about him. I just want him to just kind of be there. And from me, like as a religious person, I want to get into that stuff. I want to find out who God is, So
sure.
When I hear that George was saying that there's more to the Force and there's like real answers and it's tangible and we can get in and we can hold on to that, and that's how that works, but yet at the same time it's so big that none of us can really understand it. That stuff is really cool in the prequels. Those are really cool stories that I think most people just kind of don't want to listen to. So I would love to see his stuff in other...
I'm one of those people that I don't care. I like the cake, but I don't want to know what ingredients are in the cake. I just want to eat it.
Yeah.
I think that's an analogy that I'd have to agree with, except for, I don't know, like maybe that analogy doesn't work.
Okay.
It does work, but I don't know.
From a person who the midichlorians thing really bothered me.
Sure.
Is because when I was a kid watching Star Wars and you watch Yoda, and my favorite line is always, for my ally is the Force and a powerful ally it is, and he talks about in the tree, the rock, and it binds us together. It made me like wonder. And then George Lucas says, well, no, it's the same as mitochondria and cells and cell structure.
Yeah, it got weird.
And now it's like video game points. It's like Obi-Wan's like, he has over 20,000 of these. He has 20,000 of the Force. I only have 5,000 of the Force. Master Qui-Gon, you only have 17,000 of the Force. I'm like, wait, we're counting points now? So the Force is a pinball machine? Like, get out of here.
Right.
Like,
it's just really you grow up thinking it's a life energy. Yeah.
They're able to quantify by a blood sample how much of the Force you have. Like, that just annoyed the heck out of me.
My thing is like I think that we would have to go into very long discussions on why I think that stuff is important.
Yeah,
because
sounds like a Star Wars war.
That sounds like a Star Wars war.
No,
to me.
It really. I don't think it would be a good one, because I think the conversation has to go into why I personally do enjoy the religious and how I think that to one person. Just a general sense of spirituality is fine, and that's the door to how you get deeper and to have a closer relationship with God. But there are different levels where people they go past that. You know what I mean? Like I remember when I felt that way. That was my first step into knowing God, and now that I know him on this deeper level, I know so much more that I can't really explain to you. And I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard to explain, especially to people who are non-religious. And I'm not necessarily talking to you, but I'm talking to just the general Star Wars fandom. You know what I mean? I think that there's this kind of idea of just a general spirituality is cool, but as soon as you start to define it, like, oh, it's okay to be spiritual, or it's okay to believe like that the world is like full of karma or something like that, but as soon as you start putting names on it like Jesus Christ or Muhammad, then all of a sudden it gets like too real, and people are like, but that's not it. I don't like that. I just like kind of that we're all connected and we're all one people, and there's a spirituality and a bond between us and things like that. But to me, why I'm religious is because I I believe that it goes deeper than just the bond. I believe that there's a reason the bond exists, and I want to know more about that bond, and I want to dive deeper into how that works and why it works, even if the answers are scientific, because times I think that God works through science. So I don't want this to sound too religious, but the thing is like, I know it kind of is, but my
Too late.
Yeah, I know, too late. But I guess my thing is like, I do like that he was going to go down that route, and I would still really like to see those stories. And I hope that someone like Dave Filoni is capable of telling those stories in some method or not, like I mentioned in Is the Force With You?
Well, you know what's going to happen. George Lucas is going to write scripts for all 3 of his movies, and then the day he dies, he's going to release them to the public on like some website like George Lucas finalmiddlefinger.com.
You mean like Ready Player One? This is my will and testament.
Yeah, it's going to be like, this is what it was supposed to be. See ya, suckers. And then like Kathleen Kennedy's going to be like, damn it, George. Like,
George!
I kept you quiet for so long. And then, oh, man.
The camera pans up like
what if
Seinfeld. Con! George!
What if the movies that he was talking about at the premiere of Force Awakens is like, oh, movies you guys will never see, I'm making them for myself and my family, are actually full $150, $200 million budget like Star Wars movies that he's shooting privately?
Plot twist, the Avatar 2, 3, and 4 are actually George Lucas's Star Wars.
They're
that would be
actually
awesome.
Star Wars.
And then
that
James
would be
Cameron,
the ultimate.
James Cameron comes out and he's just like, yeah, nobody wants to see Avatar 2, 3, and 4. I've been working with George this whole time to shoot his trilogy.
And he's right. He's
and it
right.
explains why James Cameron was like, oh, I can't have my avatars on the same day as Star Wars. I can't do that to Star Wars because they are Star Wars.
So the working title for George Lucas's real Episode 7 is Avatar 2.
Yes.
That is what
Hot
we on the
take.
Resistance
Four.
broadcast are saying right now. Yeah. All right, guys. So, real quick then, I just want to do a quick rundown yes or no's before we get out of this discussion and hear from the Resistance. So, do you guys think his movies would have been hits, successful hits? Yes or no?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Yes.
I think they would have.
Okay. Do you think fandom would be as toxic, less toxic, or more toxic than it is today?
The same.
The
Social
same.
media is to blame. Same.
Okay.
I'm gonna throw out
And-
one more specific thing on
Sure.
that first question. I don't think that Episode 7 would have hit $2 billion though. I think they
Okay,
would have been
that's-
hits, but I don't think George's Episode 7 would have been like a revival of Star Wars.
Right. Because
Okay, I
it's not
gotcha.
new. It's just George.
Correct. Yep, it's the same stories, just we're going back to them. Yeah.
And do you think he would have branched out the way they're branching out and done other things like the spin-off movies or
No.
the TV series and stuff like that?
No.
No? James?
Like all in canon? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like doing other stuff the way Disney's doing it now. So do you think he would have just done his 3 saga movies, or do you think he would have done spin-offs and done the Han Solo movie that was his kind of idea,
Yeah.
sort of,
No.
and then the movie and the TV shows?
No, absolutely not. I think that he's
Quick
never
answer,
at any-
James. Quick answer, James. Quick answer.
Yeah. All right, no. Then no.
So there you have it. You would have had 3 more George Lucas movies. But what do you guys think out there? How we're coming back to our reality now. So we're back. We're back from the alternate timeline.
Thank
What
God
do you
there's
think would
Kylo
have
Ren.
happened?
We're back. Oh, thank God.
Yeah, we're back with Kylo Ren. Yeah. So what do you guys think would have happened if George never sold Lucasfilm to Disney? Well, you had our takes on what fandom would be like, whether they'd be successful, what the stories would be like, how he'd blend the old characters with his idea for the Wills and the midichlorians, all that stuff. We want to hear from you guys, so let us know on Twitter, comments under the episodes, all that kind of stuff. And we hope you enjoyed the discussion here. But now it's time to hear from you guys because we have some Resistance transmissions, and I believe, James, you have those fired up for us, right?
Hello, what have we here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this week in Resistance Transmissions, we sent out a picture of R2-D2 and Threepio from A New Hope, and it was just a kind of a gif of Threepio saying, what makes you think there are settlements over there? And R2-D2 goes, bleep, 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 and then C-3PO says, don't get technical with me. And John sent this out, and he said, Resistance Transmission, it's time to hear from you guys. In your own headcanon, What did R2 say to 3PO here? And we got back a couple answers that were pretty fun and interesting. I'm going to read those off. Fulcrum at, oh my goodness, what is this? Delgadillo Art?
Delgadillo.
Delgadillo Art said, I could waste the power telling you, or we can compare how many memory wipes we've had. I'll start 0.
Boom, roasted.
Dude, that is like perfect. To me, that is perfect R2, like wise ass sense of humor. I love that.
Well done, Fulcrum.
Trash Buddha at Gorilla Monk said, because I was here like 30 years ago and I was with my old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, how do you not remember? Oh, that's right. Bale had your memory wiped. LOL. So that's actually pretty similar to the last one.
I love that R2 said LOL.
I love that Trash Buddha, and I wish one day we'll get his real name. Did he say if he's going to Celebration or not?
I don't know. Trash Buddha's my boy,
I don't remember.
though.
We got a lot, yeah.
But I love how he took a dig at the prequels by saying, like, R2 saying, like, yeah, remember my old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi? Like, I'm not just meeting him for the first time now.
Right, because then in New Hope, he goes, oh, old Ben never had any droids. And then R2's like, duh F, guy, I'm right here.
Yeah. I don't remember owning a droid. He's like,
how dare
right
you,
here,
sir?
Yeah. All right, so I'll take this one, James. It's from JP at JPollock77. I'm guessing the 77 is a tribute to Star Wars 77.
Sure.
And JP said, by the way, way to not get your handle, J Pollock.
It's not a tribute to Star Wars anymore. He's the 77th person.
He's the
Just
77th J
he
Pollock.
likes Star Wars.
Yeah. So JP said, or that R2 said to 3PO, I don't know, golden ass. Maybe all the life form readings I'm getting from my custom-made sensors that Vader gave me and not you.
I like that he threw in the whole Anakin had him, yeah.
Yeah, these are some subtle prequel digs here.
Yeah, I like it. Our last one is from Thomas Sholin at Thomas Sholin.
Nice. Way to get it, Thomas.
He got that handle. And he said, because I've fucking been here before, Goldenrod. And Thomas then clarified, I always imagined R2 had a sailor's mouth, even before Luke chastised him for his language in The Last Jedi, haha. So basically,
Yeah.
I'm R2-D2 if R2-D2... Like, if I was a
There you
character,
go.
I'd be R2-D2, because I talk like a truck driver.
Yeah, that is a funny thing about The Last Jedi that when... I forget what Luke says.
Sacred
but
Island, watch the language.
It's almost implied that R2 says shitty island. It's like a different S word. He's like Sacred Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Watch the language. Yeah.
R2's probably like, yeah, you had to come up here on this shitty island. It looks like Sacred Island.
Did you ever see that fan thing where they like did the subtitles of what R2 was saying in all the scenes?
No.
Oh my
to
god,
check.
guys! I'm
I
gonna
know-
tweet that out. It is the funniest thing I've seen for Star Wars fan videos.
I haven't seen
and it's
that
like
with
Anakin
R2.
driving the ship, and it's like you're such a fucking idiot, Anakin. Like all this stuff. Anyway,
I don't think I've seen that with R2. I do know that they did that for Chopper with R2 or with Rebels. But what's funny is the one that they did there, they actually tried to go in and actually make it so like this is what he really said.
oh no, this person just
Oh.
thought up random
No, yeah,
things
I
that
totally
R2
get what
was
you're saying.
saying.
But it was funny.
Yeah.
It was interesting to watch the Rebels ones too because you're like, oh, that does make sense.
No, this one was like
Absolutely.
Padme and Anakin are on that shuttle thing, and he's like, he pulls up and he's like, I just hid your drugs, we're all good. Oh, love it.
People are clever, I'm telling you. That's the one good thing about the internet is you get to find more clever people out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is all that we have for the Resistance transmissions this week. But I want to thank everybody for sending in what you did because these were great answers. We had a lot of fun with these.
Awesome. Yep, keep those coming. We try to post them out there, and we love hearing from all of you because you guys are hilarious, and we love making you a part of the show. And after you're done listening to this show, which you're about to be, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube, and please take 5 seconds to rate us 5 stars on iTunes and like and comment on our YouTube videos. As always, Be sure to head to our website, StarWarsNewsNet.com, for all of your latest Star Wars news and information. You guys can get in touch with me on my Twitter at Johnny Hoey and finding me writing and editing over at StarWarsNewsNet.com every day. James Baney, how about you?
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram at Myra Trunks. And like you were saying about the TeePublic thing, we just put out those Darth Maul shirts. So
nice.
Yeah, so if you guys want to go check those out, if you haven't seen, we put those. There's
Do
a
they
red
highlight
Darth
his
Maul.
little foot or?
Yeah, he has it
His
says
little
little
metal
foot in the bottom right hand. No, there's a red one with like a black design, and then there's a black one with red design. So it's kind of cool. Whichever you prefer.
Nice.
So go check those
James,
out.
actually, I just had an idea for another shirt where we should do a zoom in on like Kira's eye and do the reflection of Darth Maul's lightsaber in it.
Ooh, yeah. So if you guys like that, hit me up and say, please make this shirt. Please make this shirt.
Yeah, and then give all creative credit to
Lacey.
Yay!
Speaking of Lacey, Lacey, where can people get in touch with you?
People can find me on Twitter at Lacey Gillerin. I'm usually tweeting some funny stuff, antagonizing John, telling James he's so smart. It's a good time. Tweeting about Kylo Ren, the usual.
Right on. And be sure to also, in addition to our podcast, check out our news show, Star Wars News Net, cleverly named after our website, StarWarsNewsNet.com. Lacey's over there hosting that one, and you may find our ugly mugs on there from time to time. We'll see where that goes. But we're also going to have awesome new content coming on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, in addition to all of our other formats. We have a lot of new friends who have found our podcast recently, so I want to say thanks for checking us out. We hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for new giveaways and contests, and please take part in our questions and transmission segments. We love making you a part of the show. To our longtime fans, you know the drill. You savvy vets, you. Have a great weekend and be ready for us on Monday because we'll have a new episode fired up for you, as always, right here on the Resistance Broadcast.